Welcome back everyone, it's Mark with exoticcarplayplace. Today I'm going to introduce to you a BMW E70 X5 35D oil change. That's what we're doing today, yes, oil change. We're going to do it a do-it-yourself today, and I'm going to show you the tools you need, I'm going to show you the materials you need, the oils and such, and then at the end of the video, if you stick around, I'm going to share with you my last visit to the dealer, how much that ended up costing me through the dealer, how much I actually saved doing it myself, and I will provide a link at the very end of the video. If you care to watch that video, by all means, check it out and it'll show the entire process, what it ended up costing me with the dealer. So there's a few tools that you're going to need for this work. Number one, you're going to need a flat blade screwdriver of some type. This is going to get you able to pop some of the hoses, and I will show you that as we go. You're going to need a 17 millimeter socket, 17 mil, with an extension, helps you get in there a little deeper. This is for the drain plug. You will need a longer extension, a deep socket as well, for the oil filter housing. This is a 32 millimeter socket, 32 millimeter, pretty substantial as you can see. And I've got that attached to a long extension and a 1/2 inch drive ratchet. Of course, you're going to need an oil filter. Very important, you need an oil filter here. And I'm going to show you inside. So you're going to need a filter, and you're going to need the replacement rings. There's an O-ring and the copper crush gasket for the bottom of the oil plug. You're going to need that. You're going to need some DEF. No, this has nothing to do with the oil change itself. I do this as an add-on because typically the dealer does a top-up as well when they do an oil change. And of course, one of the filler caps happens to be underneath that one extension hose. And since I've got the hose off anyway, I might as well add some DEF fluid. So I always do this while I'm doing an oil change. And then you are going to need about 8 liters of SLX Professional Castrol oil. This is specifically what BMW specifies for this engine. Don't use all kinds of random different oils. It has to have the LL04, LL01 designations. That is a very specific type of oil and additive, the way this is constructed, that is made for these engines. So you need this oil. This is what the dealer specifies under warranty conditions. I know other people use other types of oils, but for the warranty factor, this would cover you. You need 8 liters of that. And then of course, you need the dirty pan. Good old oil pan, you're gonna need one of these that can support at least 8 liters of oil, so you're not gonna be spilling all over. Clean that up. So we use a 17 millimeter socket on the drain plug. As you'll notice, sometimes there's a cover here. Now the dealer normally does my oil changes, so I'm not sure what happened here. Often there is a cover here and it hooks in, and you snap it here and this unhooks. So it looks like it might have been left off for some reason. But anyway, not a critical piece. Nonetheless, looks like somebody's left that off. Now we cracked that loose. That came off pretty nicely. And make sure, I got another tool here, but it's the same as a flat blade you can use too. Make sure that O-ring comes down with it. There we go. And out she comes. Now we gotta wait for this to do its thing. And we're gonna start working at the top of the engine now. Let's just let this drain out, and we're gonna work on getting the filter out next. So the first thing we gotta do is remove this cover. That pops up straight back. That cover has to come off first and foremost. I always like to give things a bit of a wipe. The next thing is we have to get down to the oil filter housing, which is right down in here. Right there, there's your filter housing, so you're gonna have to get access to that. So we're probably going to take this off just to get a little better access. Plus, we're going to be adding the DEF fluid down in here in this container, or in this reservoir as well. So might as well take this whole tube off. Okay, so we lift that out. Let's do this end first here, because this is our intake pipe for our fresh air to the engine. I always give this a little bit of a clean as much as I can. Then we're going to do the other end here. There we go. Easy peasy. So we've got this air tube taken off. Now we have better access to pull our filter. We have lots of room in here now, and of course to add our DEF fluid, we can add some of that when we're in here, and that's why I said about getting more DEF fluid. So you got a few things. The beauty about this car is it actually has a dipstick, and so we can check our oil levels before we have to rely on the computer system, because you don't want to overfill the diesel engine. You will fry the engine. So what we'll do is we can check the oil level here before we actually fire it up. But this car has an actual dipstick, unlike the M5 that, you know, I always speak of here regularly. That car doesn't have it, but this car does, right there. So now we grab our 32mm socket, long extension, and our ratchet. Now we're going to use it on this housing here, the oil filter housing. Ah, there we go. We're going to loosen it off. Try to go gentle, not that it really matters once you start turning it. Doesn't sound very nice in there actually. I'm going to slowly back this out. See that leaking all over? You want to make sure you give it a chance to drain out a little bit into the housing. Let's give this housing a quick little wipe after I pull the filter out. And of course I put the housing in here. I use the plastic bag in the old filter box just to prevent too much oil landing all over the place. So I've got a nice little secure spot for that. And then you want to disconnect the filter from the housing. Okay, stop. So now I'm going to pop that filter out. Put the filter back in the bag. And lo and behold, we have the housing ready for a new filter. Now the kit I have doesn't have the O-ring replacements for these bottoms, so we'll have to reuse that. I do have the new O-ring for the top here. We would definitely want to make sure we replace that. If you don't replace that, you might have yourself a leak. So now I want to get the old O-ring off. I'm just using a needle. You can use kind of a pick or whatever you need. Let's get that started. Old O-ring, garbage. You never want to reuse these kind of things, especially on the outside where you can leak oil to the outside of the engine. That's bad news. You don't want that. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to crack a new bottle of oil open. Tear that out. You always want to have fresh oil on these O-rings so they don't bind. Otherwise, when you turn the housing, they can bind and then they pinch and then they wind up actually coming apart, and you don't want that. So I'm going to use a little fresh oil. Here's the new O-ring right here. Let's just put some oil on this. O-ring, nice and greasy. We're going to take this housing out. I'm going to work it back on there. Work it back into the groove. There. Now it's fully in the groove. It's all the way around. Make sure it's really nice and oily. Oily is good. Then we get the new filter and we put that on the end here. So I've got still a little oil on the hands. Now there's a couple of O-rings inside on either end of this filter. You want to make sure that those get greased up nice too. Give a better lubricating surface when you're pushing this back into the housing. So we're going to put that in. So there, it's snapped in there. You got to make sure that you've got this filter is fully seated. Pushed all the way in, you might have to wiggle it a little bit and snap it down. That's what I just did. So then you look at that position. Filter is definitely fully seated into the housing. Not coming off anytime soon. So now we can thread this back into the housing. Thread that back in. Now the key with this, hand snug at first, you never want to over tighten this stuff. Okay, so now we use our 32mm socket and we're going to snug this down. Again, don't over tighten it, but you want to feel that resistance, the additional resistance. There. I'm not over tightening it, but I feel it snug. There. So with this, I'm not going to share with you the torque specs. There likely is one in the book, but a lot of it unfortunately comes down to how well the O-rings are all lubricated, and if your filter housing has some burrs on the threads, or there's a lot of factors. The point is, you just want it nice and snug, not construction torque where you're reefing on it. You basically just want to snug it up where you can feel the resistance and it sort of locks in. Just give it a wee tweak a little more. Don't over yard on that. If you do, you're going to break a housing, you'll have a problem. So the biggest thing, of course, is how we're going to verify that is once we do run the vehicle, we'll make sure that's not leaking out of the housing, make sure it's not leaking out from underneath from the drain plug. 2 points of leak potential here, and we just want to make sure we don't have a leak. That's the way we're going to know that we did this properly. So we've got the drain plug, we've got the old copper crush washer. Now it's not the end of the world if you don't have a new one. I've reused these at times as well. Big thing is once you snug it up and you run the car, does it have a leak or does it not have a leak? It usually is going to hold. Once it holds, it's going to be good for the duration. I recommend changing the O-ring out, but it's not a panic mode. Sometimes what you can get away with is turn it around and then it kind of recontours it. But I'm going to change it out. So I'm going to take that off. I'm going to put a new O-ring on. So I've got a new crush washer. That's that copper washer. And I'm going to be putting this back on. Let's do that now. Okay, so it's still pitzeling out of here a little bit, but we're going to shut her down right there. So first thing is, you'll notice we've got a new copper ring on there. We're going to thread that in there. Hand tight. I'm going to give it a little wipe here because of the little oil. I always like to keep things clean. Nothing worse than you do it all the right things, and even if you don't have a leak and all of a sudden you got leaks coming, you got oil dripping on the ground after, putting you in a state of panic because it dripped off of a cross member or a piece of suspension or frame or something. We're going to tighten this up. So again, we use the 17mm socket, 17 mil with the extension. Just makes it easier so I don't have to get my hands in here and knuckle buster. That's why I use an extension. Don't go crazy, it's an aluminum block. You don't want to strip anything out, nice and snug. Snug. And that's all there is to it. Now we've got this. Next is putting the hoses back together up top, and we'll fill her up and check it, go from there. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, I'm going to take this cover off. So actually the first thing you got to consider when you're working with this DEF, diesel exhaust fluid, is it's not really nice to the skin and the eyes. So the idea is protect yourself. I've already got gloves. That's why I'm using goggles right now, and I'm going to use a funnel so I prevent splashing all over the place. In this case, this housing here, you can use a set of generic pliers, thumb wrench, or some other kind of tool of some sort. So I'm actually using a 17mm wrench to undo that top. You can use any tool, but this will do the job too. So I got that. I'm going to undo it, and the rest should be by hand. Take that off. Funnel time. Let's put some funnel in there. I'm going to start pouring the DEF fluid in here. Okay, so now we're going to undo this funnel. We're going to take that off naturally. And we're going to do the other side. We're going to top up the other side. This one's more or less full. Put the plug back onto it. Don't need this very tight. You don't want to tighten it really hardly at all. Just going to snug it on. There, good enough. That's tight. Since we're on the topic, we're going to do the other side as well. I'll just do that now before we get going on the oil change. And we're going to fill this one up too. Okay, we're just going to empty this out. Put the DEF fluid lid back on this side. This is the operating tank. Done. Okay, so now we grab this. This is the next step. We're going to put this back together. Put the hose back in here. Snap that in. Put this back in. There we go. That's all back together. We're good there. So the next thing what we're going to do is now we're going to add the oil. We're going to run it up, make sure everything's tickety-boo, and then we're going to put the top cover back on, and that's it. Okay, go.
Yeah.
You filming?
Yeah.
You'll notice it says Castrol. That's because this is the sponsored oil. This is the approved oil for the company. So we're going to put that down there, put a funnel, and we're going to start adding some oil. Okay, so before we add any more oil, I've just added 6 liters. Now, as you can see, the vehicle's propped up this way, and the dipstick goes to the back of the engine. So the poor part about that, of course, is it shows full right now, the way the vehicle's sitting. When I dip it in here, I put the dipstick in. And if you look, it shows it full pretty much. Thing is, I don't want to add more now until I see it on the ground and the vehicle's level. I don't want to add too much oil, because if you add too much oil to this engine, diesel engines fry really fast from too much oil. So put the dipstick back in. I would say we have enough oil at least to start the engine now. So we can drop the vehicle back down more on a level. We'll idle it for a bit, we'll let it settle, and we'll add up what else we need to put in. So all we had to do is we topped up another 1.5 quarts or 1.5 liters. That takes us to a grand total of about 7.5 liters from bottom to the top is all it took, 7.5 liters. So make sure you buy that 8th liter. Don't forget about it. Make sure you have enough to top it up. I left a half there for filsies for later on sometime. So just to summarize, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I did all of this work. The oil was $13 and something per liter, plus the filter, plus the def fluid. All in, I'm into it for about $150, $160. Now, if you want to know what I paid last year through the dealer, my video is at the end of this video, or the link is at the end of this video. Be sure to click on there if you want to watch the full detail on it. It gives you the whole layout of the bill and the invoice from the dealer. But in short, they charge about $260 or $250, $260. So that leaves me at a grand total of $100 saved by doing this myself. Now, what did it take? What did it really take? It really only took me about 2.5 hours, and that's just me fiddling around. I wasn't in a rush, I wasn't scrambling. It was a beautiful day out here. I cracked a beer, I didn't show that part of it. It was just a beautiful day out here, enjoying the weather, so I wasn't in a rush. A couple hours, I saved myself $100. So at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it or is it not worth it to save $100 on an oil change? For me, that's almost half price. That's about 40% off of the original price from the dealer. So for me, part of it is me exploring the car, doing some cleanup and learning what it's all about. That's actually the first oil change I've done on the X5. It was actually very simple, very, very simple. So it's not daunting at all. The key takeaway here is you do not want to overfill it. You can time bomb your diesel engine if you do that. Make sure you keep it slightly between the two lines on the dipstick. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed the video. In short, easy job. Do it yourself if you want to save a few dollars. If you don't, I get it. You know what? It's not a ton of money, but every oil change saves some money. And if you save $100 on every oil change, you do that one per year, that's $100 you own a car for, it's $1,000 in a 10-year time frame. Be safe, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Mark again with Exotic Car Play Place, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.